In a Catholic magazine, I was reading a very interesting article. The article was on church attendance. So it left me kind of shocked and surprised and somewhat amazed and disappointed. It said that in Europe, 93% of Catholics do not go to church. Only 7% do. In the United States, 74% of Catholics do not go to church. Only 26% do. In the Diocese of Greensburg, 71% of Catholics do not go to church, 29% do. So clearly what we can conclude is this: there's a whole lot more people not going to church than there are people going to church. So you have to ask yourself the question, what would it take to get people back to church? Now, maybe the church for the first time, or if they once belonged and they're Catholic, but they decided to stop going to church. What do you think is going to do to take people to come back to church? Any idea? What do you think we need to do? Okay, that's going to be a good answer right there. Someone that side over there said ask. Now, it turns out to be that the answer to that question is in today's gospel reading. Now, the gospel comes out of the first chapter of Mark, verses 14 to 20. Now, in today's gospel reading, Jesus is going to begin to try to gather hand-picked 12 apostles, 12 disciples. And in this gospel reading, Jesus gathers 4 out of the 12. In the subsequent gospel of Mark, Jesus picks the other 8. Now, Jesus uses a very simple method to hand-pick these 4 out of 12 apostles in today's gospel reading. And he uses this method right here. Let's take a look. He uses what is known as the KETS method. That's an acronym, but it simply means keep it simple, Simon. And for St. Margaret Mary's Parish, it simply means keep it simple, St. Margaret Mary. You know, evangelization, growing the church, you don't have to have an elaborate, expensive system in place. You don't have to have a huge program to try to figure out how to get people to come to church, especially those who are Catholic and those who are Catholic who don't go to church. It doesn't take a very expensive or detailed program to grow to church. Now, Jesus uses what is known as the KISS method. He uses simple, very little method to grow his church to get, in today's gospel reading, 4 out of his hand-picked 12 apostles. Let's take a look at what he does in verse 16, 17, and 18, chapter 1 of Mark. Now, in these 3 verses, it goes like this: as he, that's a reference to Jesus. So, as Jesus passed by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting their nets into the sea. They were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, come after me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Then they abandoned their nets and followed him. Now, when you look at those 3 verses, especially kind of the bottom half of what you see on the wall there, what method does Jesus use to acquire these 2 men? He asked. He did what? He asked. He invited. Take a look. They were fishermen. Jesus said to them, come after me, and I'll make you fishers of men. He walked up and he asked. He invited. And then they took the opportunity, the invitation. They said yes to the invitation. They abandoned and then went and followed Jesus. Now, at this early point in these 3 verses here, Jesus has acquired 2 out of the 12. Now he wants to get more. Should he say to himself, well, I've been successful with this method, so I'll try something different? Well, he's going to say to himself, this works. Simply asking, simply inviting, that seems to work. So I'm going to use the exact same method again to see if I'm as successful the second time as I was the first time. Let's look at verse 19 and 20 of the first chapter of Mark. So then again, he, that's Jesus, walked along a little farther, and he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They too were in a boat mending their nets. Then he called to them. So they left their father Zebedee in a boat along with the hired men and followed him. You see it? There it is again. He called them. He invited them. He asked. He called them. And then they left their father Zebedee and they went to follow Jesus because he made the invitation. He made the ask. You see, an invitation, the response or yes or no can only be given. You cannot receive a yes response to an invitation if the invitation isn't made. You can't receive a no response to an invitation if the invitation isn't made. So what Jesus is saying, I'm going to invite. And once I invite and I say, come follow me, come fellas, I'll sit back and see what happens. I got a 50-50 shot. Some are going to say yes and some are going to say no. And so far at this point, all 4 of these men in the gospel verses that we looked at all said yes. The importance of inviting. What a simple little method. That's the KISS method that Jesus used. Keep it simple, Simon. He just decided to say to himself, I don't have an elaborate system. I'm not going to educate a bunch of people and we're going to go out after we study programs in church for a couple years and we're going to go out and try to grow the church. I'm simply going to use a simple little method called ask, called invite. I'm going to invite people. And in doing that, I should grow my church. And in fact, he did. Let's just watch this little video because I think this little video really brings out the idea of what I'm trying to talk about this morning.
Did you know? Studies show most people will come to church if invited by a friend. Yet in the last year, less than 3% of churchgoers invited a friend to attend. Inviting is uncomfortable, but here's the thing. Love shares. Love grows. Love multiplies and flourishes. And a church family rooted in Christ, reaching out in love, thrives as well. What if 5, 50, or 100% invited those they know to learn about the one we love? What if we invited? What if they came? You have influence in your community. Invite.
You know, the church attendance is purported, and the article I read is pretty deplorable. Well, it's pretty sad. 93% don't go to church in Europe, 74% don't go to church in the United States, and 71% in the diocese don't go to church. Those are some pretty sad numbers. And those numbers, unfortunately, just seem to increase and get larger. But how do we get people back to church is simply called invite. So your mission today and this week and for next Sunday, should you decide to accept it, and hopefully you do, is simply to invite someone you know that is Catholic, someone you know doesn't go to church, and simply say, come follow me. You could drive in my car, you could follow me over to St. Margaret Mary's Church, just simply invite. That's how we can grow the church. That's how we can double our numbers without much effort. Jesus did. He starts off with the original 12 disciples using the simple method of invitation, and that grew to 24 to 48 to 96, the numbers we have now. It's simply based on the gift of invitation. So I simply leave you with that challenge, and hopefully it's a challenge that you in fact accept. But we can grow our church, and we can get many, many more people back to church so they can experience, not because we want them in these pews, but we want them to experience the love of God and Christ in the Eucharist, to come back to a center, to a base, and maybe it'd be something that maybe they need in their life. Who knows? But simply invite. So invite someone you know that is Catholic, that doesn't go to church, back to Mass. Let's see what happens.